Now presenting Robert Banks with Nephros.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Robert Banks. Thank you for attending. I'm joined with my colleague, Judy Crandall. We are passionate about water. So today we're going to show why Nephros is a perfect fit for my passion and tell you about what makes Nephros special. Before we get started, this is the safe harbor statement. And from a governance perspective, I have to share this, make these acknowledgments so you understand what disclosures and all the like that we're sharing with you. So let's jump right into it. Nephros provides leading filtration solutions for patient care facilities, government organizations, and many others, such as schools or correctional facilities. So it's really the fact that we've got an FDA Class 2 cleared product that makes us suitable for infection control and dialysis water. We support both the medical and commercial, and removing such bad actors that contribute to the aesthetics of water, like taste, odor, smell. To the right, you'll see some of our stock market data, and you can see our number of shares, 17,000, has drastically increased over the past 3 months. We've got a pretty wide 52-week range, and right now we're sitting right about the middle of that range. And as of March 31st, $21 million market cap. Here are some of the highlights that might be of most interest to the investors. We've got a new executive team. We're really focused on growing our proprietary technology. We are growing the demand by aligning guidelines with our differentiated technology. So guidelines such as ASHRAE 514, which is expanding beyond Legionella. Legionella is pretty common, pretty well known, pretty large bacteria, and that's important later when I talk about size exclusion. But it now includes viruses and endotoxins, which are a little bit harder, or I should say a lot harder to remove. The latter also generates much higher costs for hospitals when it comes to treating patients. So that's why that was also included now. In addition, we've got ST108 and AAMI. These standards are giving additional guidance for sterile processing as well as dialysis applications. With all of these different tailwinds, Nephros is well suited to benefit from these new guidelines. Also with this growth, we're approaching GAAP profitability when I combine all this with our operating rigor. We're really focused on growing our programmatic business. You're going to hear that word programmatic often in this presentation. That's the buying and replacing of filters as they expire. This consumable nature of our product really works to our advantage. So all this growth, it's really fueling a strong balance sheet. And I want to highlight that we have no debt, which allows us to be well positioned for future growth initiatives. We added this page because it includes a little bit of my background and also Judy. Judy, our new CFO, brings a wealth of knowledge and experience from the public markets and makes her a very strong partner for me and complementary to my skill sets. Meet the board of directors. You've got Alyssa, Joe, Arthur, and Oliver. The continuity that they provided as I took on this role about a year ago is really key to leveraging their own success, their experiences, all to the benefit of Nephros. And although Arthur has taken a retirement role with Wexford, he still manages their day-to-day operations and represents their financial interest in our company. Nephros combines science, solutions, and support. We were founded in 1997. So I want to take you on a little 30-second history ride. End-stage renal disease is why we were founded. It's a chronic, incurable illness. The only options are replacement of the organ, such as a kidney transplant, or renal replacement therapy, dialysis. And that's the systemic filtration of blood, basically using our technology or some technology to filter the bad stuff out of the blood so the patient can have that function of a kidney. Nephros, nephrology, now you're starting to make that connection. Patients rely on filtration for their survival. Nephros took that knowledge and basically used that for water filtration to support patients and in that healthcare space and also dialysis. So we expanded beyond the dialysis original intent for the technology. And it's leveraging that hollow fiber technology for healthcare and other applications. We break this up into two two groups, the infection control group and dialysis group. What's important, these devices are 510K cleared as Class 2 medical devices. And the key function is retention of waterborne pathogens. Our proprietary hollow fiber media works through size exclusion. What that means is, you got a pore of a certain size, anything bigger than that pore doesn't make its way through. And now this type of technology is recommended in the new ASHRAE 514 standard. I'll discuss the benefits, applications, influences, customers, and sale type for each of the product categories that I mentioned previously. The first I'd like to discuss is infection control. The benefits and capabilities. We basically can purify EPA quality water to make it suitable for drinking. And additional uses such as surgical hand washing, ice machine feed water, all those things. It aids in control of that infection because the pathogens don't make it through our filter. It's ideal for remediation of compromised water and preventative maintenance. So sometimes people might use it in response to an event, or they would use it as an ongoing maintenance feature as well. Applications would include point of use such as sinks, showers, healthcare equipment, and other things like ice machines, water coolers, anything you want to keep pathogens out of that water stream. If I look at what's driving our infection control business, it's heavily influenced by the opinions and guidelines given by the CMS, TJC, Joint Commission, ASHRAE. ASHRAE 188, and now the new 514, it details the water management plan in great detail and gives guidance on how to actually create a water management plan. The typical customers are entities that are taking care of patients. Think of compromised patients, people that might have just recovered from surgery, burn unit victims, PICUs, NICUs, anybody who might have an immunocompromised scenario where they're not quite functioning at 100% are more susceptible to the pathogens that you might find in water. So the customers or organizations taking care of those types of people are a typical customer that we would approach for our product and solutions. We're now looking at customers such as schools, correctional facilities, labs. Other people are also finding that they could have outbreaks due to water pathogens. And the typical type of sale, there's two. One is that programmatic business. This is the recurring replacement orders, the consumable. And the other is the emergency business, where you have an outbreak or some compromised water event. Maybe there's a patient death. Maybe there is a test that shows positive on some Legionella bacteria. Imagine that hospital that has to shut down the wing and remove all those patients to somewhere else. What if it's bigger, like the whole building? The loss of life, loss of revenue from these patients, the inconvenience, that's a huge problem. But by implementing our point of view solutions, the hospital is actually able to stay open without moving the patients. They can put our filter on the end of the shower head, on the end of the sink. So it allows them to continue to function and provide that protection that's FDA Class 2 cleared. So that's a very important driver for business, and that's a one-time use. So those are the two types, the programmatic and emergency. The second type of use I described earlier was dialysis. And some of the benefits are submicron filtration. It's really ideal for a lot of different configurations. Different companies make different machines. They have size constraints, think of the labs. So because of our flexibility there, that's also really important. The leading competitors have filters that last about 6 months. Ours lasts 12 months. That's also a big savings from their perspective. Other applications are following an RO, so it might be used for polishing or a barrier for preventing any breakthrough that might have occurred, and also portable dialysis as well as stationary machines. Business drivers in dialysis, you've got the ISO standards, you've got ANSI, AAMI. All of these are driving new rules such as ST 108, which is requiring certain treatment that wasn't always required before. Internally, we have hired a dedicated person who comes from dialysis clinic, and she's a rock star. I'm super pleased with her progress, her ability to penetrate the different clinics and tell that value story. And her being a clinician from her past, she knows what really helps and hurts and how to sell that value. Our customers are dialysis clinics, our healthcare facilities, but more importantly or bigger are our OEM partners. These are people that are building machines and then installing our filters as part of their machine, which gets it validated. So switching to a different filter or moving it changes their validation and kind of a guaranteed revenue stream for us. So we like this business. These are typically large accounts, not many, a handful or so, and they also engage frequently in new product development. So they're looking for ways to build the next generation of machine, and it's a long cycle. So we know well in advance what's coming, where we're going to be used, and sales and things like that. So it's a very predictable business. The last section I'll talk about as far as benefit capabilities are the commercial side. This is less differentiated, but I do want to talk about some of the benefits we do offer. It's high quality, reduction of water contaminants. I mentioned the aesthetics, lead treatment, scale treatment, sediment. It does improve the performance of the machine, helps it last longer, reduces maintenance, and it's available in a lot of different sizes. Since there are so many players who produce commercial filtration, it's good that we have the ability to change the filter and match the key or the manifold that's already there, so the work that's done is minimal to change out. Also means we can be easily replaced. So applications will be food and beverage, ice machines, coffee. Often it's pre-treatment for applications that we use because the other filtration does not necessarily help with the aesthetics. In the commercial space, we have influencers such as IAPMO, NSF, ANSI standards. They're all things that are driving what's done and kind of dictating how places like hotels and restaurants filter their water. This is primarily serviced through Donastar, a partnership that we announced last year, and they've already got the relationships in that space. So that's working out extremely well for us. The type of sale is programmatic. You don't typically have a commercial filter in response to an emergency situation. Because the water smells bad doesn't mean that there's a problem with people dying or getting sick. Looking ahead, this next section is very exciting to me. I'm going to cover our growth strategy and also some of our new developments. So the growth strategy, there are 6 areas that I really want to talk about that we're using to drive growth. Number 1, our sales team and that sales force competency. We have a new national accounts focus. We're looking at fewer partners, but more key, well-aligned with our value message partners. And in addition to our local experts broken out by region. So you can have one of our regional sales managers visit you, discuss why and how our program can change and how we fit into your water management program, which are part of the new guidelines. We have a land and expand, this cross-selling concept. If we go in and we're asked to help for an emergency situation, we've landed. That doesn't mean we have it as a repeat customer. We now have to sell them on the value of doing this on a repeat business, a recurring business. If we're treating their ice machines, we notice that, hey, there's some water fountains or bubblers also in this area. You should put the same filtration on those consumed water areas as well. That's that land and expand. The next one, converting emergency business to programmatic business. This is this big one-time sale that we delighted the customer. We shipped the same day or next day. We've kept them open. They're thrilled. When problem's done, they've mitigated the problem a week later, 2 weeks later, and we say, have a nice day. We're changing that where we actually try to provide more ongoing services to help keep them out of that problem to begin with. So if we can get our filters installed in line, if we can have areas that are problematic and replace that with a programmatic solution, that's preventing them from ever making that headline in a newspaper, which they don't want to achieve. That's that conversion from emergency to programmatic. We also spend a large amount of time with our local experts giving education. The smarter the customer is on the new guidelines, the more likely they are to turn to Nephros for the solution, because we happen to be pretty uniquely positioned to be able to solve those guidelines. In addition, we're exploring new products, new partnerships, and digital tools. I'm going to touch on some of those in a little bit, a slide or two from now. So if I look at new developments, the programmatic business should just be repeat business. We should, based on our analysis, get customers to buy over and over again because they rarely leave us. But analysis is showing that customers are not renewing on a regular basis, mainly because they just forget, because things are working. Why change it? You said 6 months, 8 months later, 9 months later, they still have the same filter and it's still producing great water. So that's been one of our issues. So this new digital tool I'll talk about in a minute helps and reminds us that, hey, you've got a filter that's expired. Time to order a new one, time to have a new one installed. Or better yet, let us take care of that installation and swap out for you. So future state, this will also enable greater analysis on why any failures might occur. It'll give us insight to how customers are using and operating, and really try to get that programmatic business going on a regular basis. The new ST108, which I've hinted at a couple of times, it's driving still processing inquiries. We're getting a lot of people that are in the probe washing, after a surgery, washing all the tools, wondering, how do I comply with the ST108? Can you help me with my problems here? And that's really good business for us. We're being opportunistic outside of the US. Not a big, huge market, but we're looking at some of the closer countries and seeing how we can provide some of those needs. The drivers are different, the competitors are different, servicing are different. So not well positioned, but we are finding some opportunistic areas where that is having some success. This is new, microplastics. I can rarely go through the headlines and not see someone talking about microplastics and how it's impacting health. I think we're still just trying to understand what that impact is and how to deal with it. My next slide will go into that a little bit more, but that's also driving some of my NPD investment, new product development investment, which I'll discuss. Microplastics. Microplastics are bad. It changes the game when they're microplastics, but what is really tough is nanoplastics. People refer to microplastics and nanoplastics pretty interchangeably. The only difference is nano is smaller, a lot smaller. If you look at that diagram on the lower right-hand side, you can see, oh, maybe a little difficult in the back, but you can see the size from 100 microns down to 1,000 nanometers, a fractional part of how big a microplastic is. These are so small that the human exposure, it presents a lot of health problems, and because it can penetrate the biological barrier. It can actually get in the cell and start disrupting your DNA. That's where we're starting to see some of these problems that are just, we hadn't seen before. And if you look at a map to see where microplastics are most prevalent, you'd be surprised. It's in some of the most populated areas. And that's not typically being removed by standard city water filtration. So our standard Nephros DSU filter, remember I talked about that direct barrier, that size exclusion? Guess what? That still applies, even though this is not a virus. It still means that if you've got 0.005 microns, it's not going to get through this filter. So because of this small pore size, in fact, the smallest in the market, I think that we are the best suited company to address NMPs when it comes to size exclusion and it gets down to that nanoplastic level. So more to come on this. We're still trying to figure out what this means. It's not driven by regulation right now. And typically some entities don't act unless they're forced to for some reason. So I talked a little bit about the digital tool and the programmatic business. Basically, we have taken an exciting step, I think, towards digitizing with the launch of a filter tracker. This documents filter installations, it captures critical data, it allows us to see where these filters are going and being installed. That's key. And there's other things we can start to do too. Maybe account for environment, flow rates, number of patients, the municipal water quality data for that specific area. All these things impact the performance of our filter, life, and any potential failures. This is just the beginning. Once I have all this data, I don't even know what AI and other things can teach us about how we solve and solve the problems with infection control. But I knew that was very exciting. So we're really starting to branch out into this digital area. I'm going to dive a little bit into the markets. This is important. We have a pretty impressive CAGR there. So on the left-hand side, you see the CAGR is 17%. It's a little lumpy. You heard me just talk about the emergency business. One quarter you got a $600,000 sale from a one-time offense, and you don't have it the next quarter or the next year. So it makes it lumpy. But what I think is more important is to focus on the active customer sites. These are customers that have ordered more than once over some shorter period of time, and shows that we are constantly growing that. Now, if you look at the number of hospital beds, which I can use as a proxy for the infection control in hospitals and healthcare patient care facilities, that number of beds is pretty stagnant, if not dropping. Overall, the market, at my best guess, is 2 to 3% growth. But we're far exceeding the growth of that market. So that growth is coming at expense of our competitors. I love going against competitors. Having a differentiated technology, a different product that they can't compete with, really puts me in a different game. So it's nice to be in that position. But I just wanted to remind you that I think that ACS really shows the strength of our core, despite the lumpiness of the one-time sale. This note, our adjusted EBITDA difference and reconciliation are in the appendix. So what that, we had some notices last time around. You can go to the appendix and see that new slide. But what I take away from the financial highlights, we've been trimming our losses and nearing GAAP profitability. This is through increasing revenues and positive cash flows. So pretty excited to be there. I will be jumping for joy once we get there. I think we're close. This slide is just pulled together a few of the noteworthy lines from our balance sheet that we thought might be of interest to this particular audience. I won't read through them, but you can see there's some pretty positive numbers there. So last financial slide, we're just over $4.3 million in cash on hand with $0 in debt. So basically, it's a very strong financial position. It's something that the team is very proud of, that we've worked really hard to achieve and try to maintain. Some of the key takeaways from my talk today, really cultivating that Salesforce excellence. That's the way that we reach the different customers and expand our business. We're leveraging our competitive advantages. Really having that proprietary technology is gaining those new customers, solving problems that the others can't solve. We are spending a lot of time educating on all this new guidance. New regulations are confusing. I had a conversation with I think it was the Kentucky Infection Control Prevention, and they were still looking at and trying to understand the 2020 guidelines that came out. So they're a few years behind, but as we educate more and more and share what's new and what's better for the infection control world, we're starting to gain more business because of that. But it is a slow move. Nearing GAAP profitability, which I've said a few times. You can tell I'm a little proud about that. And the ER to programmatic conversion with some of the digital tools that's really going to help us continue to grow that active customer sites. And that's the summary of the key takeaways with our company, our strong balance sheet. And I wanted to thank you guys for listening. And I believe now I can turn it over for some Q&A. We might have some. And we did have one hand raised, yes.
So the NMP claims that you're going after, how do you basically go about that? How do you educate the market?
Yep. So the question for those on the phone, the NMP claims that we're going after, how do we educate the market? How do we kind of show and grow that space? So right now, we're just basically explaining what our filters do. Because of that size exclusion in the pore size, physically cannot pass through. So through that, we have a direct barrier. There aren't guidelines or regulations that impact this right now. It's not being driven by some entity saying you must do this is how you fix it. So it's really white space. It's trying to grow and figure out where we play and how we accomplish the goals of whatever is trying to be done. But good question. We're still figuring it out, but it's exciting. Question here? Nope. I think he was just stretching.
Phenomenon called pressure.
Yep. Yeah, so the question is the phenomena of forever chemicals, and can we address that, or is there something that we could do to help that situation? So if I understand forever chemicals, PFAS, PFSS, okay, so when you think about those, it's the same answer applies. It's the size exclusion. It's actually easier to remove those chemicals than it is for nanoplastics, which are the really, really tiny ones. So we have commercial filtration that we're positioning now to be able to address that. But what we're finding is that's not any technology exclusive that Nephros provides. So I think there is an opportunity there. Again, there's no regulation driving it. There's nothing saying this is how you do it, solve the problem, what success looks like. So it's a little bit of trying to create a market. So I will focus more on the nanoplastic problem because that is something I feel nothing to do with Robert, that we as a company are uniquely positioned to satisfy.
There's a follow-up question.
Yep.
I know that you've launched something have you had difficulty getting traction on the first level? Because you look at the ice machine with that using packages that ice in a commercial setting, so machines, etc. thousands of the people work for.
Yep. So the question is, when you think about the commercial side of our business, and I think the presumption was we launched that 4 or 5 years ago. What are we doing in that space? How are we growing it? What's the opportunity in the market look like? So our commercial opportunity, that little bit of a history lesson I gave in the beginning was because 97 formation, kidneys, healthcare, commercial was not on the minds of the creators at that point. Now that we look at where we can play, commercial is a less differentiated space. There are a lot of players. The market is much bigger, a lot bigger. However, when you take the number of competitors and add that in there, that means you got to have things like a relationship already. So that's why the partnership with Donastar is so important. They have the relationships with Tractor Supply, with all the rest stops at the truck and other places. So Donastar is our key partner, and they're pursuing that and growing that in that hotel, hospitality, restaurant space where we don't have the presence. We're basically a sales team of 6 or 7 trying to attack 6,000, 7,000 sites is a little bit difficult. Good. 2 more questions? Yes.
Are you able to share a plan with the next quarter?
Yep. So the question is, are we able to share when we think that gap profitability would be in the next 12 months, next 2 quarters? I will rely on my chief financial officer to give a response to that one. So Trudy, if you could step up to the mic, please.
Hi, and thanks for the question. You know, we don't give forward guidance at all. And just as the nature, we're still young and growing, and we predict as much as we can project. But suffice to say, that's our goal. Our goal is to get there. We hope to turn the corner in the foreseeable future. We are investing resources only as sales grow to compensate so we can continue to improve our cash flow performance. There's some seasonality to cash flow. We tend to pay year-end bonuses always in first quarter. The first quarter always is sort of hit, but annually the goal is to continue to improve results. And so we hope sooner rather than later.
We have time for one more question. Yep. Question is, for those in the phones, what happens to our expired filters? That's a good question. And we have an inventory. We have a lot of inventory because we want to be ready for those emergency response. If you call us, we can have you 1,000 filters there the next day. When the filters reach their expired or end of life, we're not able to sell them. It's something that cannot be used anymore. So as they approach that life, we start to take different actions, whether it be donating them or destroying or other things. But that are used. So maybe just a correction for the question. It was what happens to the filters once they're consumed and used end of life in a application where it's filtering out infection. Those are not recycled. If you think about the nature of what it's doing, it's removing harmful bacteria, viruses, and disease. So when you're in the medical field, in the healthcare space, recycling of materials like that is not something that's typically done. Good question. Is it incinerated or is it medical waste? Yeah. Yep. That's a good question. Let me follow up with a few of customers and find out exactly how they handle it. I don't think it gets put in the infection control bag and thrown in medical waste. I think it's, what's that? You don't get them back? Yes, correct. Oh. Yep, we don't get them back. The customer handles the disposal of the filters. But thank you. Good question. Okay. All right. I don't see any other hands raised, and we are running at the end of our time. So I thank you all for your attention and your great questions. Appreciate it. Have a good evening.